because you have John Jones, you have Francis Ngannou, and you have Tom Aspinall. I can't remember a time where there were like three dynamic, interesting heavyweights to watch that
Mm.
could all like kind of be close to being the best heavyweight in MMA.
All right, welcome to another episode of Two Fight Fans, where we talk about all things in combat sports. I'm one fight fan, Colin.
And I'm the other Stewart.
All right, so we got a few things. We're not talking about the card that's on this weekend, right?
No, I mean, can you name any fighter on that card that you've seen besides someone on the main event?
Nope.
Yeah, that's right on. Yeah, so we'll do a grab bag today. Because yeah, this might be on paper the worst Apex card that they've had this year, which is really
Jeez.
rough. Yeah, I think so. Like they've got the two heavyweights who've already fought before, and it was a 3-round wrestling fest at heavyweight. Neither one of them will ever be a title challenger unless, you know, some sort of mass casualty event kills 7 people in the heavyweight division.
Oh my
And
god.
then I don't think there's another single ranked fight. Wait, I take it back. There is one ranked fight in women's bantamweight between Yana Santos and Chelsea Chandler.
Oh,
Uh, Other than that, too, a bunch of people are coming off losses. This is Swallop's slop and gravy bucket. This is just the overflow bin. And so we won't talk about that. We've got other cooler things to talk about and
all
possibly
right.
worse things to talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
So kick it off.
Uh,
What's the first thing you want to
okay.
touch on?
How sphere tickets are like insane, but apparently it's like not two things. Like it's not selling as well as people thought, and like as a result, like ticket prices are going all over the place. And like some people who are like trying to get tickets at this thing or who have gotten tickets at the thing have been like hit with insane like additional fees or service fees. So not only are the tickets like thousands of dollars, but like part of that is like the service fees are like I think one of them is with like this one guy who tried to like he got his tickets and because other places aren't selling as well, the prices are dropping down. So he tried to like upgrade his tickets essentially, but he
Yeah.
kept getting hit with like $1,500 service fees or whatever just to do that.
Yeah, man, Ticketmaster. Or is it through Ticketmaster or the Sphere? Because I know it's got dynamic pricing. Because at one
Uh,
point, the most expensive ticket reached $17,000.
17,
But
Jesus.
I think now it's down to like 7K, and a couple of those like the worst seat was like 4,000, like that was the
Yeah,
floor, and now I think it's around $1,000. But again,
yeah,
who's this guy who's getting tickets to the Sphere card this far out when we've seen routinely in the UFC this year that fighters fall out, cards change dramatically.
yeah.
Like you think between now and September 14th, it's not going to suddenly like this card won't magically turn into Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena and like, you know, Cyril Gahn versus the winner of Sergey Spivak and Marcin Tybura. Like that could easily be the card. Uh,
Yes, but there's always a chance that Pereira will come and save the card that you've paid to watch.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't. It's at this point, it's like just allegations, but I wonder if we'll see Alex Pereira fighting with kind of the recent sexual assault allegations made against him that
Oh
seem to
boy,
be piling up and being or corroborated.
I have not heard
Yeah.
any of that yet.
Yeah, I was. We won't talk about it now, right? Because of course, who knows? It's speculation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wonder if he's going to be out for the rest of the year because of that. But who knows? Yeah, I don't know. Don't like. I. That look. Get three buddies together. Go to your buddy's house with the biggest screen. Buy the pay per view for what is it, 70, $80?
Yeah.
Then next time you go to Vegas or there's a musical show you want to see in Vegas where they're going to be able to like use the sphere probably to a better degree, spend probably $200 or $300 on good tickets there, and then you will still have saved thousands of dollars, and you'll have gotten both the chance to see the fight and a chance to be in the sphere. There's no need to There's no need to be like, gotta spend 5K on this thing and especially for one ticket. Like, are a lot of
Yeah.
people going just by themselves? Right? Because
I don't
usually, if you're
know.
gonna get tickets, you're gonna go with people.
Yeah. I
Um,
I don't know. I don't know who like all right, my friend group, we're all gonna afford this here. Like
yeah. One like, I don't know. I I know there's a lot of like newer fans, but I'm like, if you've been watching MMA long enough, like this card can't like it doesn't strike me as like wholly unique. Wow, like my eyeballs are popping out of my head. See what this is. Like I want to
yeah.
go to the Sphere, but I'll just wait till like a band I'm interested in, or at some point the Sphere is gonna be like, hey, we're gonna show like an immersive like movie or something, and I'll go, oh, okay, I'll go see that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll pay a
this
hundred bucks.
card also does not shout that, like, if it was anywhere, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like the Abu Dhabi card is better,
Yeah.
right? It's like and UFC 300 on paper was better. So it's like
Yeah.
you already are not going to the best or second best card of the year, but you're like, whew, got to get in that sphere. Silly, silly. I'll be interested to see how people react. One thing I was thinking about like what are they gonna? Remember we were talking about like how do we think they're actually gonna utilize the sphere?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I guess like I began to think when you're at a UFC event, it's really easy to avoid looking up at the big screen and seeing all the sponsorships
Mm.
and like commercials that they play during the pay-per-view. But now you have a captive audience who can't help know anywhere they look if you're putting sponsorships or you are playing a commercial for something so you can get
Yeah.
more revenue. The sphere is you've got people and you can guarantee that people see it. I
That's true.
wonder if
Yeah.
it's going to be a glorified like
Billboard.
yeah, essentially. Because we know the UFC is not below doing that shit.
No,
There's
that's true.
faster stuff everywhere, yeah. And like they might have like an immersive like, ooh, a giant howler head monkey appears and then goes like whoop, and then like it reverberates throughout the entire uh like stadium, and like then it's like howler head. Like I bet you it's gonna be that. I don't think it's gonna be anything like much more interesting. Um, yeah.
I was
Who
thinking
knows?
the only thing it could be like that wouldn't be as distracting would be like if they projected, you know how on ESPN they have like real time stats, you can see like where they've been hit and it like tallies things.
Yeah.
It would just be like that basically, where you could like
That's
see
not
all
like
this.
That's not like an interesting
I know it's not, but
view, Like what? Why? Yeah, for 1,000 extra bucks?
yeah,
Yeah, nah. Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe the UFC will show us that they really had something cool, but
yeah.
yeah, weird. All right.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So,
Yeah.
um, the other thing, it was announced this week that Francis Ngannou is making his return to MMA at the PFL.
Yeah, in October.
Yeah, I don't know who he's fighting, but
Do you not recognize the name, or do you like literally not know who the person is?
both.
Oh, it's Renan Ferreira, who's 6'8", 6'9". He's a huge, huge man, like Brazilian Tyson Fury kind of. Big, lanky, awkward dude. And his
Kind of,
last,
he reminds me of like Bigfoot from
yeah,
the old
kind of.
UFC days.
Yeah, he's definitely faster than Bigfoot because Bigfoot
Okay.
was slow as molasses. No, Renan Ferreira, I think his last fight was against Ryan Bader because Ryan Bader was
Oh,
the Bellator heavyweight champion. It was when they
yeah,
had
yeah,
like, and I think Renan Ferreira was the only one of the PFL champions that was able to beat the Bellator champion, and he knocked him
yeah.
out
Oh,
in like 21 seconds.
whoa.
Um, yeah, I mean he's like a big, well, he's like 6'9", like he cuts down to 265. He's got decent hand speed for someone that size. And that's about it. So it's really, I think this will be more of a where is Francis Ngannou at now that he's in his late 30s? He's had those two boxing matches. He hasn't fought in MMA in, was it 3 years, 4 years? And just coming off both that like vicious knockout against Anthony Joshua
Yeah,
and he lost his child, his son, I believe.
yeah, yeah,
Like so I think this it's exciting to have Francis Ngannou back in MMA, right? Like that's I'm glad he's making money in boxing, but he is still the king of heavyweight in my mind, so it's like I wanna see him
Yeah.
compete in the MMA heavyweight, division, but after this, I assume he'll immediately just go back to boxing, like, fight Andy Ruiz or Big Baby Willis or Deontay Wilder or something,
Mm.
um, but, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny that we, like, just talked about how he was one of the few people to, get one of those, exit clauses or, like, not be affected by them,
Yeah,
and
the
he's,
sunset clause.
literally, testing the free market, so,
Yeah.
he's been able to do some boxing and, you know, I agree with you. I think he is still the best heavyweight, uh, mixed martial arts fighter right now. It's just too bad that we're not seeing him compete with the other best of the best, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the UFC could have made it happen, but they decided they didn't want to. Yeah, all they had to do was let him like box 1 or 2 times, and then he probably would have come back to the UFC and like hung onto the belt and fought John Jones and fought Tom Aspinall, but they played silly, silly games, and then they
Yeah.
lost him, and he went and he made the money anyway, and now they don't have him. Even though, like, I don't know if he'll be a big draw on the PFL because I don't even know where you buy PFL pay-per-views. In
Yeah.
yeah, in Canada, let alone America. Maybe it is on ESPN Plus in America, but I don't know where you buy them in Canada. Um, so yeah, it's the PFL is just such a distant second place to the UFC that
Yeah.
even if you're like the biggest star, like barring maybe being Connor McGregor, I think it'll damage any pay-per-view sales compared to what it would be in the UFC. Um, but I hope it does well so that you know, he can make some money and the PFL can do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I had seen an interview with him saying like he might not fight after that he's like debating retirement.
Hmm.
Because he made like close to 30 million, I think, for those two
Oh,
fights between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Um,
nice.
yeah, and then I think he gets paid, what is it, like 6 or 7 million for this fight. So yeah, that's retirement money, especially
Yeah.
because he's planning on uh splitting his time between Cameroon and Las Vegas. So like,
Mm.
I assume you take 1 million American to Cameroon, and you can probably live pretty comfortably for numerous years. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, like he's kind of it's been enjoyable to watch Francis Ngannou kind of uh, succeed and be happy in a way. What a weird thing that just having a fighter succeed and be happy feels like it's sticking it to the UFC.
Yeah.
Even though it's not really, right? It's just like, oh wow, we see a fighter that's like doing things that they enjoy doing and like getting opportunities in their career because they've built up their name. Wow,
Yeah.
isn't that great? Like, yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah,
Come on,
it's
see, you know fighters aren't allowed to be happy.
I know. They have to be miserable at all times.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what I learned in the Roadhouse movie. Just be a sad, miserable bastard, and like then you get to like learn cool, I don't know, fighting. It's a fuck that movie. We'll get to that in a minute, but God. Um, yeah. So it's what a weird mess at heavyweight. Um, because you have John Jones, you have Francis Ngannou, and you have Tom Aspinall. I can't remember a time where there were like three dynamic, interesting heavyweights to watch that
Mm.
could all like kind of be close to being the best heavyweight in MMA. I guess maybe in Pride, but you had Fedor always above them, but you had like
Yeah.
Fedor and Crow Cop and Nogueira for a time. Yeah, it really hasn't been since the heavyweight Pride days that like heavyweight division has felt so rejuvenated. And the UFC is like squandered it with not making Francis and John Jones, and he routinely squanders it with not making Tom Aspinall John Jones.
Yeah.
Just what a they finally get like an interesting heavyweight like division or like lineup, and they're like, nah, fuck it. We prefer Stipe versus John Jones and nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stupid. And did you see like Dana White like going like arguing about like why John Jones needs to be the number one pound for pound fighter?
Oh, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get why he is so, like, pro John Jones and so boner happy for John Jones now, because he was, like he used to, like, not be that way at all.
No, he used to be super well in like the past, like those 3 years where John Jones sat out between his last title defense and then coming back. Dana White, John Jones said, like, I want Deontay Wilder money. Like, I would like 10 million or 20 million to fight if I'm going up to heavyweight because I'm a huge draw. And Dana White's like, he's not worth that much. John Jones, like, I don't even know if he wants to fight when, like, Francis Ngannou won against Stipe Miocic. The first thing Dana White said on the microphone was like, if I was John Jones, I'd be cutting down to 185. I would never go near heavyweight, right? Like, he was very dismissive and denigrating of John Jones. He fucking, like, it said like John Jones will never have a headline a pay-per-view again after John Jones pulled out against was it UFC 152? I think it was Dan Henderson, and then they wanted to replace it short notice with Chael Sonnen or something, and
Hmm.
John Jones was like, "No way, I'm not gonna do a short notice fight," which is his right, like he doesn't have to. But then Dana White like freaked out and is like, "John Jones is a pussy," and like blah blah blah, and you're like, "Wow, this is yeah." And now all of a sudden, it's like I really think he was sitting coked up in a boardroom one day and was like, I think Stipe versus John Jones is going to sell a million pay-per-views. I think that's we're going to cross the $1 million pay-per-view mark or the million buy pay-per-view mark this year. And then the fans routinely by asking when is he going to fight Aspinall have shown that they don't care about Stipe, and Dana White is just butthurt that his idea isn't actually good. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like, look, man, the fans are telling you the fight that will cross the million buy mark, right? Probably John Jones, Tom Aspinall as a headliner at Madison Square Garden. That might
Yeah.
sell a million pay-per-views. Just do that.
Yeah.
But I don't understand this. Yeah, but I don't know. He seems to like ever since they sold the company and like everything is going fine. He seems to be getting more stubborn and like this is the right way that MMA should go.
Mm.
And I know how it should work. I'm gonna cut Makayev. I'm gonna like do it. It's like I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, well, enough about that. I'm excited. Ngannou's gonna come back. That'll probably be the first PFL pay per view I've ever watched.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I like caught the highlights afterwards of the PFL Bellator like crossover one. But I've never
Mhm.
like watched live. But I'll probably, unless something more interesting comes up, like I don't know, I get roller skates or something. Uh, then I won't watch it. But yeah, that's what they need for actually getting pay-per-view buys in the PFL because they don't really have a ton of pay-per-view stars. It's gonna have to
No.
be Ngannou. I know they have Jake Paul talk about signing Nate Diaz.
Wait,
Like they,
PFL actually signed Jake Paul?
yeah, they've got him to a 4-fight contract in MMA. It's
Oh,
the same thing as like Ngannou's one, which is like you're allowed to take boxing matches as much as you want, but if you're gonna compete in MMA, it has to be with us. Um,
I see.
So so like he might never fight MMA, but I would assume Jake Paul just one time will come in, fight an MMA fight again. He wants to fight like Nate Diaz in like a catchweight fight.
Uh,
Again, Jake Paul's like huge.
yeah.
Uh, so uh maybe he'll do that. And he's a part owner, I think, of the PFL, or like he has some stake in it.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, it's like I'm sure he'll get a huge percentage of whatever their pay-per-view sales are, even if he loses. And that will damage his like boxing career. So, but who knows if he does it? That's not an interesting like MMA fight, but it's probably what they need to sell pay-per-views. Um,
Mm.
yeah. Anyway, speaking of fights that may or may not ever happen,
Yeah.
have you seen the photos coming out of Conor McGregor cosplaying as a biker man in South Dakota?
Is this a joke or?
Mm-mm. No, he's at the big, I can't remember what town it's called, but like the big biker rally in South Dakota every year?
Oh, is it the Harley Davidson one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay.
Conor McGregor, it's the photos and videos of him have been leaked on the internet of him being there, dressed in leather pants and leather vest, shirtless, full shaved head, like shaved beard, hanging out around and kind of looking miserable and out of place. Not realizing that a lot of people that go to these things are like hard dudes from like Montana or Minnesota with like ponytails and beer guts. Like I think he thought it would be like a sexy like Sons of Anarchy fair. But it's not. It's like old biker dudes who are missing teeth and like definitely have done meth in the past. Uh and he looks pretty unhappy being there. Uh, my question to you is like, what do you think Connor's doing there? And in seeing this, do you think Connor's not really gonna ever come back? Do you think that's the final nail in the coffin that like he's obviously not in Ireland training. He's obviously nowhere where there's an MMA gym training. He's like drinking beer at a biker rally.
Yeah, okay. I thought I saw a video of him like shotgunning a beer somewhere, and I thought it was just some club in like Europe or something or whatever. But it was at this biker rally apparently.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen that one. I've just seen the ones of like kind of an older lady with bleach blonde hair and biker tattoos trying to grind on him at this thing, and him just looking around, being like, "What is this? I thought this was gonna be like sexy Sons of Anarchy time." And it turns out it's not. But I'm like, what the fuck are you doing in South Dakota, my man? Like, I thought weren't you supposed to be training for the comeback, or like, aren't you a billionaire? Like, why are you here in a like a really the leather vest he's got on looks so cheap too. It looks like he got it from like a Spirit Halloween store. Um, I'm like, what are you doing here, dude? And then Michael Chandler on Twitter went off, being like, I think the fight is off. Like, I don't know if Connor's like actually coming back.
Yeah.
And then he called out. Who did he call out? Maybe Dan Hooker again, or oh no, he called out Max Holloway for a BMF fight later
Right,
in the
right, right,
year.
right.
So I guess if you're advising Michael Chandler at this point, like, what do you actually like tell him to do? Because he's sat out. He's almost 30, or he's 38 now. Like, he sat out most of his prime for this fucking fight.
Yeah. Yeah, he wanted that big payday fight, and I don't think he'll get it. Yeah, it's kind of like you said. I don't know if Connor will come back, and he's just kind of like it's just one of those things where you see like okay, an athlete who was really popular, really at the top of the game, how they just kind of spiral out and start doing like whether it's getting in trouble with the law or partying or whatever. It's just like it's almost better if they don't come back because if they do come back, it'll just like I don't imagine any of his fights going well. It'll just tarnish whatever, you know, allure or mystique you had about him during his fight days. And
Mm.
I don't know if he realizes that or thinks that or what, or just doesn't care anymore. Because yeah, if you're Conor McGregor, you've won the game. You were wasn't he like a plumber or something before fighting?
He was a plumber's apprentice.
Okay.
So he like did it, I think, like a couple months of training to be a plumber, and then left.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, okay, you went from being apprentice to within like 4 or 5 years being the biggest name in like the sport,
Yeah.
making all this money, having all these brand deals and selling companies, like you've won. You did it. You did it in record amount of time too. So like what else is there to do? But
Yeah.
I know also like if you get all of that, like it can become addicting, like a drug, getting the fame, getting the money. And, you hear athletes talk about it all the time and how it comes and goes as quickly as he got it. And that would be my concern is like in like 5 years, we hear like, oh, Conor McGregor does some crazy thing and is now in jail,
Yeah.
like tries to rob a casino or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of I mean, you see it with athletes constantly when they retire. Um, right? They kind of like lose their sense of identity, right?
Yeah.
When your entire being and your entire focus every day is dedicated to like getting better at this one area, and that's how you identify yourself, and then suddenly you stop doing that and you don't need to do it. It reminds me of Tyson Fury, right? After he beat
Mm,
Klitschko, he's like, okay, I've accomplished it. Like, I am the best. I did the thing I set out to do. There's not really another hill to climb unless I kind of manifest it, right? Where like winning the championships feels like almost like an external mountain to climb, and then it's like now it's my internal personal record I need to set. Um, right? He got addicted to cocaine. Was drinking. Like he felt like he had no purpose. He didn't know who he was.
yeah.
And it feels like Connor has been doing that uh, quite a bit, right? And then like probably the drinking and drug use is not helping. Um, yeah, because like you said, like once you win, you kind of go like, well, what do I do now, right? Like
Yeah.
so much of it was like how hungry and like the dedication to the winning, and then once they're what's the fucking line from Die Hard, right? when Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. Like that's kind of what it feels like. And so now he's like, well, now I'll be a biker guy. And you're like, what are
Yeah.
you doing? Like, what the fuck is going on? Um, yeah, but it does seem like his head's not in the game. Probably shouldn't fight. And I kind of feel bad for Michael Chandler, but like also, we've seen erratic behavior from Connor way before this Michael Chandler fight was announced.
Yeah.
Pitching your entire career and your one last big payday to erratic Connor McGregor, it's probably not a good idea. You know,
Yeah.
like his team and he probably should have had a backup plan. And I know he's just like the human embodiment of an inspirational poster, being like, "Don't be sad for me. Like this path that I walk will only make me stronger." And you're like, "Yeah, man, you just lost out on like millions of dollars that you could have had though." Right? And like you can try to inspirational poster like, "I'll see the silver lining in not having millions of dollars." Your way through life, but that's gotta sting. Yeah, I would tell him to just like get back in there and take as many fights as he possibly can. Um, yeah, just like he needs to do his like kind of own PR campaign and go, I'm calling for like 6 fights this year. Like I want to start with Patty Pimblett and like I'm gonna blast it, right? Like just like take like low level fights and but just like get like 6 of them in a row. So like if you're making 200K or so, you can still make $1 million in a year. You know, like you just got to do this and like have the UFC like sell that as an attraction. Like can Michael Chandler beat the record for most wins in a calendar year in the UFC? And just
Okay.
pop, pop, pop. That'd be what I say, like, right? Because he's gonna run out of time. His body is eventually gonna. I mean, he's like 38, right? Like, it's hard to compete in 155 and 170 when you're that old. He's really athletic, but he relies a lot on his athleticism.
Yeah.
So, like, you got to do like Patty Pimblett, Bobby Green, Hanato Moicano, Jalen Turner. You got to just like blast through these dudes and be like, I have the most ranked opponents in a calendar year. Um,
Hmm.
that'd be what I say. Or,
Okay.
I mean, who else is there to like? Maybe they could bring Nate Diaz back or
Oh,
Jorge
jeez.
Masvidal back and have him fight them because they're both like, both have expressed being interested in the UFC. But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, who would you even put him against? Because he's been out for so long,
yeah,
and it's the lightweight division. It's stacked. Like,
yeah, and it's moving on without him, right?
yeah,
Um, and he's already fought Justin Gaethje. He's already fought Dustin Poirier and lost to both of them, right? There's no
yeah,
like, I don't think they were really entertaining fights. Like they were really great, but like I don't know if there's a demand for or Justin or Dustin would want to fight him again.
yeah,
The only thing I could see is if they bring back like Jorge Masvidal still under contract. Nate Diaz does want to come back. Um, and then like look, if Nate Diaz beats Michael Chandler, then Connor might come back for that trilogy fight. But I just at this point I'm like I don't think that like I don't think there's any way to keep Connor in a camp. Um, like the breaking of the toe thing, I don't know. I don't know what was going through his head. Like he definitely has the right, and like there, I don't begrudge him at all not wanting to fight if he has an injury, right? Like he said, like he fought with like a blown out ACL against Chad Mendez. He had like a broken foot and like a banged up shin against Khabib. He had like a broken hand in one of his fights, right? He fights injured constantly and like proved it, so he doesn't have to do it anymore. But seems like mentally, if the second he got like a broken pinky toe, he was like, "Nah, I don't want to do this." It seems like he was like, I'm not really into this thing. Like, I don't really
yeah,
want to do this. Not like in a, he's mentally weak, but just like you have $1 billion, why are you gonna go fist fight in a cage for like 1 million,
yeah,
right? Like that's silly. Um, yeah, just go sip pina coladas on your yacht. Like that's what you should be doing. Yeah. So anyway. Alrighty, what's this other thing? I see Ronda Rousey's name on our document here, and I haven't thought about her in like 37 years, so
yeah. I hadn't either, but then like, we've been talking about other fights for a long time, but there's all this like, I kept seeing her name pop up about people saying like she was as good as people thought she was. She wasn't as good. She hasn't done enough for MMA. Like all this kind of, and I thought like, okay, like I just wanted to get your thoughts because I remember when we were watching when she was coming up and she was like she was one of the like top draws for the time,
yeah, it was her
and
and Connor.
yeah, and she's the one who led women's MMA, to the UFC. So
Mhm.
yeah, that can't take anything away from her. But there's like a lot of comments. I think even Data at one point said like, you know how he gets, like Ronda Rousey was like not as good as people thought she was, or she'd be like destroyed in today's game or whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like I guess there's a lot of criticism around Ronda when she when she started to go on that losing streak towards the end of her MMA career.
Only 2 fights. It's a
Yeah,
tiny streak, tiny
yeah.
streak.
But like, and people, and she was saying that she lost because she couldn't really focus on her training, and she had to do like so much for like building the sport and building the UFC brand and just being the face of it, that like it basically took her away from her actual training. And I've had some thoughts about Ronda for a long time, and I wanted to know what your
Oh,
thoughts were about her. Yeah, because I think she's actually like a really good fighter, and like could have won those fights. I just think she had really bad coaching.
she did have terrible coaching. That is
Like
true.
I don't know who told this great judoka that, hey, you can stand and bang with anyone. Like
Yeah.
this was not in a point where it was not like people were getting tired of her arm barring people. Like
Mhm.
no one was like, oh man, another arm bar win. Like this wasn't that great. Like no one thought that, So
Mhm.
I don't know why anyone if your skill set is so good at that, I would just keep saying, "Hey, keep doing that until someone figures it out." Like,
Yeah.
there's no need to try to do anything else. So I really don't know why Ronda Rousey decided her last 2 fights to go away from the thing that made her so successful. And I really think it was just coaching. And I feel like
Yeah.
there's not enough, I don't want to say blame, but for this time, blame being put on that. It's always like, oh, Ronda got washed really quickly, or oh,
Mhm.
like she wasn't really as good as people thought. It was just she was spoon fed competition or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, Edmund Tarverdyan is not what other fighter does he have in his stable that, like, has proven?
Yeah.
Again, one of those things, like, I don't think John Kavanagh, Conor McGregor's coach, is actually a very good MMA coach because he hasn't really produced anyone else that has had any success. Um, uh, Faraz Zahabi hasn't, besides George St. Pierre and Rory McDonald, like, who else has he really produced that had success? Right? Like, I really admire coaches more like Henry Hooft or what is that Arizona camp? Factory M. No, what is it called? I can't remember. Factory X. Right, where like you routinely see good, like they might not ever get like an astounding champion, but they have routinely like 7 or 8 dudes in each division that are in the top 20 or top 30, right?
Mhm.
They can take anyone regardless of athletic ability, regardless of like what inherent skill set they bring in prior to training at the gym, and they can go like, hey, look, I can mold you into a fighter that can have success. Maybe you won't be champion, but you get success. Like look at Trevor Whitman. He's got Kamaru Usman, Rose Namajunas, Justin Gaethje. Who else does he have? Corey Sandhagen, right? Like they have people and they can take people with wildly different styles and go like, we can make this work. Like we can make this happen, as opposed
Mhm.
to those gyms where like Edmund Tarverdyan, who has like, I have Ronda Rousey. The end.
Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, 2 things. One is I think there was a lot. So talking about her being overrated, I think Ronda was really overrated, but I don't think
Oh,
that's a product of her skill being worse than it was. I think Ronda had the most like overhyping of any fighter I've ever seen.
okay.
Right, there was discussion about, like, how she could beat Floyd Mayweather and how, like, she could compete with
What?
men's 135. Yeah, there was, like, this huge right, and it was, Joe Rogan talked a bunch, like, "She could probably beat men at 135, right? Like, she might be able to beat Dominic Cruz," right? So there was this huge narrative, which I think made it seem like and then when she did lose, people were like, "Well, if that could happen to her, like, then she wasn't actually as good as we thought." And I was like, "Yeah, but you thought she was literally a Marvel superhero. Like,
Mm.
you didn't treat her like a real, like, human fighter, you know?" And so I don't think that's really her fault. And she also played into it, and I think having all of the media, like, she got more media attention than Conor McGregor initially, mainstream media attention. And so I think it like played it up as like she's the most dangerous woman that's ever lived, and like she's this amazing, immortal, unkillable god.
Mm.
Which like of course then when she gets knocked out, it's like, well, yeah, like of course she's overrated because you all thought like you all thought that she literally was like Captain America. And like guess what? There's no human on Earth that's actually Captain America. So I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing. So I think she was overrated in that sense, right? I don't think it was any, and I think she ended up buying into that hype, and I think Edmund Tarverdyan bought into that hype as well. Because,
Mm.
like you said, standing on the feet, knocking people out, she did like get a knee knockout. She did knock out Betch Kohea, but right, Betch Kohea started training MMA, I think 3 or 4 years before that title fight as a way to lose weight, right? She's not fighting a competition that's extremely high. She was just
Yeah.
light years ahead of a lot of people. And the biggest issue that, like, looking back on her that I saw is like, right, like you said, she's an amazing judoka. When she could get it to the clinch, she often could get it to the ground. But she wasn't fighting anyone that practiced like breaking of grips. And that was one thing that you saw, like when she did tie up for like 3 or 4 seconds with Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, like she once got her arms clasped, but like they both immediately had practice a technique to break the grip, right? Shrugging off. It was like a head and arm throw that she was going for against Amanda Nunes, and Amanda Nunes immediately put her hand on the elbow and like ducked and pushed her off, and then uh, Holly Holm fought the hands immediately. Whereas in a lot of other fights that didn't happen.
Mm.
But I think you said like about the like what Ronda needed to practice a lot was she was very bad actually at like closing the distance. A
Yeah.
lot of the time fighters would back straight up and run into the fence. And so it was easy for her to just like keep moving forward and grab it. Or she would start throwing hands, and even though they weren't very good, she was very confident in throwing them. And so people would panic and go like, "Oh shit, I gotta like get close so she stops punching me," and fall into the clinch with her. But Ronda was very bad at like actually closing the distance herself. And what
Right.
Edmund Tarverdyan should have been teaching her was like, all right, if someone's skating away from you, how are we actually going to close the distance without what happened in the Holly Holm fight, which is just running into punches routinely.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think Ronda, no, like you can only grade people with like the competition that they have at the time, right? Like she was the best and like clearly the best in women's MMA for a long time, but it was just like a low. I mean, even look at women's bantamweight now. Like it's not a super high skilled division
Mm.
at the moment, and I don't think it was
Yeah.
then. It might have been a little bit higher then, though, right? You had Holly Holm, you had Misha Tate, you had Ronda, right? That's a little bit higher level. But yeah, it's like she bought in. I think she bought into the hype, and the hype was so silly around her. And I'm gonna keep throwing shade at Joe Rogan because he routinely would go on his podcast and be like, she would smash anyone, and you're like, bro, there's like clear deficiencies that anyone with eyes can see. And like what beating, yeah, Betch Kohea or like beating Liz Carmouche is not like some grand like holy fuck achievement. So yeah, but it ended up being that like she skated on having really good judo skated. She ended up relying a lot on being a really superior athlete and having good
Yeah.
judo. But she never like added really anything to her game that like complemented that. She added like some really bad arm punching technique, and
Yeah.
then that was about it, right? But that was enough for a long time to just kind of like keep keep winning. Um, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, like, because we'd watched a lot of her fights, and you know, it definitely we had our own thoughts when she was actually fighting, and just trying to look back on it because it wasn't how long ago was this now? Like,
It was a
yeah,
long time ago. It was like 2016 was her last fight?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a long time ago, but also like not that long ago.
I mean, 8 years. Even look at like the difference in like divisions 8 years ago and like the skill level.
Mm,
It's quite drastic. And it's even more drastic at women's MMA because it was just
yeah,
much
it
more
was
like a
just
nascent
starting,
state.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, just because her name came up recently a lot, and it started making me think back about like how I thought about it. So like, yeah, you are right. Like the caliber of competition was not the level, that yeah, she was just like so far ahead. So that when finally she got someone who was actually closer to her level, it was kind of like it cooled it off a little bit. So
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing with like Anderson Silva. right? Like you look at the level of competition at middleweight at that time compared to what it is now. Like would Prime Anderson Silva be as phenomenal looking or even win fights against Jared Cannonier, Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya, Robert Whitaker? Like it's hard to
Mm.
imagine because he beat Forrest Griffin, who walked forward pumping the slowest 1-2s on earth, or Yushin Okami, who threw a jab by telegraphing light years before he threw a jab by lifting his chin as high as possible into the sky. And so you're like, okay, well that's not like mega impressive like in a vacuum, but it is. He's so far ahead of everyone else. And nobody, at least I haven't seen, I know people are discrediting GSP, but I haven't seen a lot of people discrediting Anderson Silva's like record. Um, yeah, so like there's so many new fans that are like they came in around 2020 and they have that horrible thing that young people have, which I know I had too, which is like history ends when I stop watching and there was nothing before when I started watching.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of just like it's like people that are like, I started getting into like movies in like 2008. And so like, I don't watch anything prior to 2008 in like film. And you're like, the fuck are you talking about? And they're like, nah, that's old shit. That's dumb. And you're like, come on. Like, and that's what it feels like with a lot of MMA fans is they just look back and they're like, well, no, nobody back then was actually that good. Cause there's like a weird conception that like everything is of the same level quality as like UFC one. And it's just not the case.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah. And I think there's also a lot of like sour grapes about people being upset with Ronda Rousey. Like, I mean, she did have like kind of a big meltdown after she lost,
Yeah.
um, and so people are upset about a woman having emotions, and so they're like, "Wow, she never was good." You go, all right, slow your roll, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Is that all the topics besides this final one?
Yeah. Yeah. And I tried to be there in solidarity with you.
Oh,
I
dude.
watched the first half of Roadhouse, and the first thing I want to say though, like when you said they like CG the fights, I didn't
Yeah,
know like
man.
what you meant. Like I was not prepared for what I fucking saw. And
Dude.
it was like I don't understand why they did that. Like it's not like you can hire people who know how to like act, like I don't get it. And if more movies go this route of having just like really shitty like CG to speed things up or whatever, like I will not be able to watch any movie that has like action sequences like that now.
It's so bad, right? And like I was watching it with a friend who like that doesn't ever watch fighting and isn't like, but I was like, look at the way it's the opening scene where they have Post Malone for some fucking reason being like badass fighter. When he does the punches, right? They're so slow and then they speed up just at the very end and like the face of the guy he's punching, you can like see the moment where it shifts to being a CGI representation of the face and then it deforms slightly. It really feels like because this was, I think, co-produced by the UFC or the UFC had a big investment in this movie. It looks like they took the EA UFC game technology and was like, well, we have facial deformation technology, so like let's use that in the movie. But it was so fucking, I mean, everything. So like the CGI sucked. The lighting, the way this movie was like lit was either like way too dark or like ultra bright. And
Mhm.
like it's like it's supposed to be Florida. Everything's supposed to be like warm tones, and like it looked like the shadows were super harsh, so everything looked like kind of like cold and dark the entire time. The sound mixing, I usually play movies on my television at like the volume of like 30, and it's fine. I had to crank it up to like 60 on my TV because whatever the sound mixing was, I could barely hear what the fuck anyone was saying. And then they would have those scenes in the Roadhouse where it seemed like they had Amazon Music being like, we have these bands on our label and nobody's downloading them because they had like they would let people play whole songs and they would film the people in the Roadhouse singing the full ass song. And I was like, is this a music video? What the fuck am I watching? Oh my, dude, dude, like I don't understand what this movie was or like meant to be. It really felt like it was it was like made in a boardroom and it was like, hey, we have to get Conor McGregor a fight. We have to try our new CGI fighting technique. It seemed like this was just a movie because Jake Gyllenhaal didn't have a character and like barely tried to act. And he's a good actor. And it was like
Yeah, I like
it's
Jake Gyllenhaal too.
yeah, it seemed like it was like he only did this movie because he's like, oh, I get to spend like 2 months in Florida and I get like paid by the studio to get in really good shape. Great, I'll do that. And then everything else, I was like, what is? It seemed like they're like, we need to like try to shoehorn uh like music in, and then we also need to somehow give like the UFC a big PR push, and then we can give Conor McGregor a. And you haven't even gotten to when Conor McGregor came into the scene,
No.
right? Okay, his opening scene is him jumping out of a window, butt naked, um, and like an Italian father yelling at him through the window, and then his opening line is "Arrivederci," and he goes like "Arrivederci," and then does his billionaire strut walking away, and we get like 3 or 4 shots of his ass as he's walking away, and he's in like an Italian market, and he does like the Terminator thing where he's like naked and he goes up to a guy and he's like, "Ooh, I like your shirt," and then he headbutts him, and then it smash cuts to him walking away, still with no pants or underwear on, just like a long like shirt, and the entire market that he, like the Italian market that he like apparently stole this shirt from is on fire. And I was like, what happened? How did he light this on fire just by headbutting a guy? Like, what is going on? He like my wife came in and she was like, dude, he looks coked out in this movie, and he does. He looks like eh, just the most HGH bloated he's ever looked, just coked out of his head, horrible acting, and like, what is the plot of this movie? It's he comes to be a bouncer. Oh, also, okay, did you get to the like the first fight scene where he's bouncing, where he like asks the guys to go outside and beats up the bikers?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, what was your thought like running through your head while that was going on?
During the fight or what?
Yeah, yeah. During the fight, or just the whole situation. You're in Florida at a seedy bar, and you're like, I'm gonna go outside with like 7 dudes. My first thought is, well, they probably have a gun, right? Like you're in Florida, like they probably have a gun.
He's already been stabbed once too, so
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah. And how stupid is that? He gets stabbed, and then he's like, "Ooh, I'll just walk back to my car and duct tape it." And I was like, "That was like a Bowie knife that he got like right in his side." And he's like, "Bah, I'll be fine." And then he's like, "Well, I'm gonna go commit suicide right after he gets stabbed in the side." He like goes and like parks on the train tracks. And I was like, "What the fuck is this movie?"
yeah.
Right? And then it's just like that opening scene, right? He shows up and Post Malone doesn't want to fight him, and then he goes and then that woman comes up who owns the Roadhouse, and it's just exposition jump. She's like, "I own a Roadhouse. There are gangs that are beating people up. You're the badass Elwood Dalton. I think you'd be really great. I'll pay you this much. You just need to do it for 1 month, and then I'll be okay." And I was like, "Oh wow." This felt like it was written by AI. It was just a summary of the movie, and she
Yeah.
just said it. And his whole thing is like being like a knockoff Deadpool, where he says like smart ass remarks and then like does a cool action move. That's all CG. Oh, uh, yeah. And then like at one point somebody does show up and pull a gun on him, or like flashes a gun in his waistband,
Oh
and
yeah,
then he's
yeah.
like, "You'll never be able to reach the gun before I get to you and then break your fingers." But he doesn't say it like a cool way. He goes like, "Huh, I'm gonna be sarcastic and witty and like do finger guns." And then he does it. And I'm like, dude, somebody's just gotta shoot this guy. Right? And like in Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee in the 70s figured out that you need to like account for guns in the real world. Like when he is supposed to go to the island to like, infiltrate the base and Enter the Dragon, he goes like, why doesn't the army send someone with a gun and shoot him? And he goes like, there's a huge embargo on guns on the island because he's terrified of being assassinated. And it's like, "Oh, okay, great. I can believe that for this movie." But we're in the middle of like Florida, where they have the most guns per capita of any state in the United States. What the fuck is going on? And they're like, what we need to do to hire the person we need to hire most to defeat evil biker gangs is like a guy who was like a former middleweight fighter in the
That was
UFC.
that was my favorite part, that he was in middleweight as well.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so this would be like going and getting like Dricus du Plessis or Sean Strickland to like defeat mobs of people. And I'm like, I've seen them, like, they've lost before. What, Sean Strickland's just gonna jab people routinely until they go away? What are you talking about? And then he's like, he trains that one like waiter, the like young waiter. Did you see that scene
Yeah,
where
yeah,
like
yeah,
he's like
yeah.
he's got a
To also
knife
be a
under his shirt?
bouncer? Yeah.
Yeah. And like he says, like, when he swings at you, just lean back and then counter. And so then the guy pulls a knife and goes to slash at his throat. And the kid, like, remembered, all I need to do is lean back and counter. And he leans back and then punches the guy, and the guy, like, falls down. And I was like, dude, you could have gotten that kid's throat cut. He could have been like, oh shit, my timing isn't as good. And then the kid's dead on the floor because you wanted to sit there and sip your, like, Cuban, like, drink. Like, what is going on? Oh, and when he first shows up at the Roadhouse and he like goes in, he's like, I'll have a black coffee. And the waitress is like, we don't have that. And he goes, oh, okay. And she goes, it's Cuban coffee. It's very different. And I was like, no human talks to another human this way. This is
Yeah.
not how people interact. It was, I'm going to say it. And I firmly believe this. And if anyone disagrees, at me, come at me. I'll give you my address. We can talk about this. Here Comes the Boom is a better movie. Here Comes the Boom
Oh
is a
shit.
better written movie. This movie is so, and then you didn't even get to Conor McGregor showing up. Conor McGregor shows up, and also, did you see the scene where the guy's like getting shaved on his giant yacht and the wind is insane?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I understand that this is like supposed to be shorthand for like, ooh, he's the notorious bad dude. But again, you could have gotten your throat cut in like a second there. Like, but Conor McGregor shows up because that guy's dad, they're real estate developers trying to like buy the Roadhouse or whatever, which also like just offer the person at the Roadhouse like $50 million. And she like later says like, oh, they offered me money, but like, this is like my pop's place. I can't sell it. And it's like, yeah, you can. Listen up. You live in the middle of like buttfuck Florida. You want to be getting out of there. You don't want $50 million? Come now. So they hire Conor McGregor, whose name is Knox in this movie. Like she's just like named Knox, like Hard
Okay.
Knocks. And you're like, Jesus Christ. They hire him to like come and like do more intimidation stuff. So like he shows up at like where all these biker dudes are living and like they've like rented a bungalow together and like are make sandwiches together. And he shows up and eats 3 of their sandwiches and they're like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, who the fuck am I? And then he like beats the shit out of all of them. And it's like, well, this is silly. Like you've just hired one person to beat up all the other people that you've hired. Like now you only have one guy to go against. And also like, why is hiring one dude the answer to beating this bouncer? Like, isn't just like bringing a gun and shooting him, or isn't just like poisoning him, or like he lives on a boat, sink his fucking boat. Like, what is this? It
Hey,
was it's
they did try to pull a gun, try to pull a shotgun on him, and that guy got thrown off the boat and eaten by a crocodile. Like,
oh my God. So yeah, and they're like, there's one crocodile in this vast lagoon, and then of course it shows up right when one guy falls in the water. It's so well, and then they kept saying, did you hear them? They're like, crocs hide their food. We'll never find the body. And I was like, what does that mean? Crocs are not cats that like bury their shit. Like, you know why you don't find a crocodile's food? Because it eats it. It's not because it hides it. It doesn't have like a hole it puts it in. Like, what the fuck is this thing talking about? It's and then he keeps going back to that like bookstore that like is like close by to the Roadhouse, and that little girl's like, it seems like you're kind of like a guy from a Western. And then when they're trying to figure out like why are these gangs coming and like showing up, she's like, this sounds like it's more of a mystery Western than a regular Western. And I was like, shut up, movie. Don't tell me what you're trying to do. Like through this like child. Like this is it was the most pandering bullshit fucking movie. And it looked so, like you said with the CGI, it looked so cheap. For
yeah,
a movie that was easily over $100 million, it was the most expensive, cheap looking movie I think I've ever seen. It was
yeah,
so bad. This it like offensively bad. Um, yeah, dude. And Conor McGregor, he'd done interviews about like how this was going to be like kind of like how Arnold Schwarzenegger went from sport to then becoming an actor. He's like, this will be like my transition. And I was like, yikes. Arnold Schwarzenegger can deliver lines better than you. Back when he didn't even know English either.
yeah.
Um,
His first
it-
movie, he didn't say a single line.
yeah. Oh no, he said a few things. I think he just said
In Conan?
no. That wasn't his first. I think Terminator was his first movie, wasn't it?
No, I thought Conan was his first movie. Just
He
turning into
drunkenly
a movie podcast now, but
movie
whatever.
podcast. No, it's important. Cause I love Arnold and I love his movies, so it's important that we know. No, Hercules in New York. That's right. They did dub it over. Um, the villain, the comeback. Oh yeah, Conan the Barbarian was before. Yeah. I mean, he had a few lines in there. I'm Conan. Great. You delivered it perfectly, right? Like that's exactly what Conan needs to sound like. But Conor McGregor, like trying to be like sarcastic and saying Arrivederci is his first line. Like I heard it and I was like, ooh, that's the best line read you got for that single line. Yikes, that's not good. It's so bad. Yeah, and then like they have like some beef later on, and like he shows up and like taunts him, and he's like, you like, and like the whole thing is that uh 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 Jake Gyllenhaal's character is like sad and left fighting because he killed someone in the ring. Which
Yeah.
again, like is if you're an MMA fan and that's why you're watching this movie, you're like, there's never been a death in the UFC, and like this is a silly, weird like right. And then like the bad guy shows up at the bar later and like he's like, I found your fight online. You killed a guy. I bet that eats you up inside. Don't worry, I won't let anyone know. And it's like everyone would know, right? Like he's a famous like athlete that you can Google search his name and that video would probably come up. Like, why is this like a secret that like only
Yeah.
the most nefarious evil man would know? It's such a and like look, the original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze is also like convoluted and silly, but it like is like campy and silly and fun. This took itself so like seriously and tried to be so like gritty, and I was like, this is for low information donkey brains. Like this is for mouth breathers who like still wear affliction shirts out in public. Like this is
Hey,
such a bad movie.
that's who watches and supports UFC, man.
I know, but I need that to stop being those people. I need them to like get a modicum of like self-awareness. Um, yeah. And one thing I do want to know, like one of my big questions as I was watching this is like, who did Jake Gyllenhaal piss off that this is the movie he has to star in? You know?
Well,
Like
apparently he's also on board to do a sequel. Like he's like
he
interested
he
in doing it.
he produced this movie with his own money too.
Oh
So
man.
my thought is he's got to be blacklisted somewhere in Hollywood. He was in like prison. He was in like Denny Villeneuve movies, the guy who did Dune. Like he can't call him up and get a role. Or like he's been nominated for Academy Award. He was in like Nightcrawler. He's in good movies.
Yeah.
He's a good actor. And now he's like doing this, which is straight to Amazon, no theatrical release movie that he produces, which are remakes of old 80s movies. Like either this is his passion or something has gone wrong in his career and they're like, actually, you're not going to be getting big offers anymore to do anything, which
Mm.
I feel like it's probably more of that, which I'm like, well, what happened? What happened that he had to like pal around and apparently like go with Conor McGregor to all these like press junkets and like help coach Conor McGregor. And like apparently Conor McGregor was very difficult because he would show up late and we saw the video of him kind of twitching and, you know, possibly was on illicit substances while he was in interviews. And like, how did Jake Gyllenhaal go from being like Academy Award nominated? Hey, this guy is like really solid. He was in Brokeback Mountain, like he was in talks of like the young generation with like Heath Ledger, is like these great new actors, to being
Yeah.
like, I'm in Roadhouse now in my 40s, and it's like Stewart threw open his mouth while he was watching it. Like that's where it's at. Like this is bad, bad, shameful. I don't want to do this bet anymore. I can't do this with my life. It's so bad. It hurts. It hurts me a lot.
All
I
right,
already
all
have
right.
to watch these slop cards and these bad fights. Like I can't. This,
See, I told you. I told you.
yeah. It's
All right.
we're gonna have to figure out something else.
Okay, for the Izzy and Duplessis card, we'll think
Yeah.
of a new wager then.
Okay. Yeah. I'll still watch Rocky. That's a good movie. I've seen that
Yeah.
movie in the past like 5 years. It's good.
Well, see,
But this,
I want to rewatch Rocky to see how good it actually is.
yeah. Like I expected this to be like kind of Here Comes the Boomish. Like it would still be kind of like, you know, they'd have witty quips that aren't actually witty, but like it was actually so shockingly bad. And I guess like I should have known right at the beginning with that Post Malone fight scene. Um where yeah, the CGI comes in and it's so noticeable and I was like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, is this what it's always going to be like?" And it's absolutely what it's always like. Um, Conor McGregor's like fights aren't always CG, but he is not very good at right. And it's extremely different, right? Doing like stage fighting and like the way that you like film a punch for a camera versus
Right.
like how you punch in real life. But he does not. He did not naturally seem to pick up the proper way to make engaging combat appear on screen. Um, yeah, dude, just yeah, like I wonder what the motivation was. Oh, anyway, also the screenwriters, there's two screenwriters for this fucking movie. This is both of their first films.
Oh, what?
And I want to know like how did they get that job? Because Colin, I'm pretty sure you give us a pot of coffee in a weekend. we could write a better movie than this. Like, this is baffling. Oh, just so bad. Anyway, that's Roadhouse. If you watched it and you liked it, don't talk to me ever again.
Hey,
Yeah.
does Jake Gyllenhaal do the Roadhouse like neck or throat rip?
Oh, I don't remember. Like, I gotta be honest, I started skipping ahead, like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Like, anytime dialogue started happening, or there's like, like, did you get to the part where like he meets the like nurse? Jake Gyllenhaal's character meets the nurse after he
Yeah,
beats
that
up
like
the guy.
stitched him up, right?
Yeah, and then that becomes like a love story, but like then there's no connection to like remember like at least in Channing Tatum's fighting, like the love story that he has also ties into like, ooh, but now I need to make money to
Yeah.
make sure that this love story can play out. That doesn't happen in this. She's just like, I
Oh,
like you, and he's like, I like you, and he's like, but I'm damaged. You don't want to be involved with someone like me. And then she just is like, no, I do. And you're like, you don't know this guy. This guy got stabbed and duct taped himself. Like he obviously has donkey brains. Like what are you doing with this guy? Also, the fact that like I know it's Hollywood, so everyone has to be like immensely hot, but the fact that they're like meant to be like on this random little island off the Florida Keys and everyone is gorgeous all the time and like nobody looks like they sweat ever. I was like, this is so silly. I've been to Florida. I know what kind of toothless weirdos live down there. They do not look like this. Um, yeah. Yeah. And it's also like Jake Gyllenhaal shows up. Like imagine if a human that looked like Jake Gyllenhaal showed up anywhere, people would like stop and look and be like, "What the fuck?" But like here they're like, "Oh, you're just a random stranger coming into town, huh?" And it's like, "Dude, look at him. He's like chiseled out of marble and like has perfect teeth. That's got to be insane for you in Florida." Yeah, it's woof. Terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Anyway, well, fuck yeah. God, dude. Anyway. Well, anything else you want to touch on?
no, thank you for that.
Yeah, dude, fuck it.
Listen,
Anyway,
I tried to do it in solidarity with you, but
it's so
I
bad, right? Like
I
it was
don't think
hard to
I'll be
watch.
continuing it.
Yeah, it's a struggle to watch. It's uh yeah, it's like I said, worse than Here Comes the Boom. And Here Comes the Boom was pretty bad. Um I was like jabbing pencils into my thigh just to kind of like keep me focused while I was watching that movie. Um Yeah. Anyway, this has been Two Fight Fan Podcast. I'm one fight fan, Stuart.
I'm one fight fan, Colin.
Next week, we're going to talk about, hey, UFC 305 coming up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Israel Adesanya, Duplessis. We will, maybe what we'll do is we might have to do a scouting report on
Yeah.
Dricus Duplessis. Because, Colin, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't understand how you can have the coordination of a newborn baby giraffe and win a UFC title.
Yeah.
And yet he
I don't
does it.
know.
And yet he does it. So we got to talk about that. We'll make picks on that fight card. If anything interesting happens this weekend, we'll talk about that and we'll make picks. But yeah, it's come back and listen to Colin and I's brains melt as we try to unravel the non-Euclidean geometry eldritch horror of Dricus Duplessis' fighting style. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right.